Hi, y'all. Welcome back to the Invisible Histories Project Talks, a series where we sit down with super cool people working across the U.S. in queer community organizing, history, archives, just things that we think are really fun projects. Today, we're meeting a new friend, which is super exciting. I'm Megan Sullivan, she, her, hers, and I'm here with my colleague.
Josh Burford, he, him, his.
And Chelsea, if you just want to introduce yourself, tell us your name, your pronouns, where you are, what you're doing, any other cool things we should know before we get going.
Yeah, my name is Chelsea Dobert-Kehn. I'm with Queer Appalachia. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm calling you guys from West Virginia today.
What's it like in West Virginia during the pandemic?
I think it's finally started to hit that that COVID is something serious. It took a little minute to catch on there. I don't think people have like the luxury to self-isolate in the way that a lot of other communities do. It's of course a mix. There are people here who are isolating and those who aren't. But when I was out and about town last week or so, it was still surprising like how many cars were out on the road and how many drive-ins were getting lines behind them. But it is beautiful. The mountains are breathtaking, and it's an okay place to avoid people.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of rural areas, you can distance, you have to go places to get supplies, but, in your homes, oftentimes you can distance a little bit easier than if your neighbor is, right spitting distance from your front door.
Spitting distance. How vivid.
Listen, I'm from LA, lower Appalachia. We don't say Appalachia. I know that is the proper, but we didn't have those kind of books. So, so we were more mountain identified than mountain chain identified. So we say Appalachia. So I'm just going to give my little disclaimer there.
Well, I think I came across Queer Appalachia online probably, 3 years ago? That seems about right. When we were starting to just kind of scratch at social media presence for IHP and what it might look like and who we wanted to align ourselves with online. So can you give folks sort of an overview about like what Queer Appalachia is? Like, do you guys have a mission and, like how people could figure out who you are?
Yeah. Queer Appalachia started around 2016. And it was originally...
So we got introduced to Queer Appalachia several years ago when we were looking for some online partners and some people that we wanted to align ourselves with. And so can you tell folks a little bit about Queer Appalachia, like how you all got started and what your mission and vision is for the project?
Absolutely. You linked up with us shortly after we began. Queer Appalachia started in 2016 as a memorial zine project to Bryn Kelly, who was an artist, a hairdresser. She was from the West Virginia-Ohio border. She had a real biting sense of humor and like a pride in her roots, her homespun roots. And she died in early 2016 as like a suicide that was really related to like Gilead and how Gilead had this sliding scale program for medication for HIV, which she had, but she was never really able to navigate or like get through to the other side to become part of that trial. So she killed herself in January of that year. And that's a really sad part of the story, but something that I think is really beautiful and powerful is what's come from that. And that the zine that we make, Electric Dirt, was her idea. And we talk about that pretty often, how it was kind of a running joke for her that she would have these she'd have these moments or jokes where she would make up like articles or parts of the zine, like oral sex tips from Shape Note singers. Was one of the ones that she would think about a lot. And after she passed, a group of her friends came together to make this zine a reality. And what happened was really like an accident. There was a lot of people were into the project online. There wasn't a whole lot of like queer and rural things happening back in 2016. It doesn't seem like a long time ago, but the queer internet sure was different back then. If you Googled queer in Appalachia, like 5 things came up. So now we've evolved into something much bigger and different, where we're more like an artist collective and a media project, and we focus a lot of our time and energy on like social praxis projects. Like we're known for, like, we did a massive coat drive a few years ago. We did a tech drive this winter. And now during COVID, which we'll get into in a minute, we're doing all sorts of projects to try and like support and uplift our community members, you know, ranging from like everyone in there. One of the things we try and say, and we like live it out pretty well, is that no one is disposable. So we try to extend that to everyone, and we're trying to support everyone we can right now.
That's very cool. You know, I was looking just to see on Instagram. I mean, but you guys are getting some serious follows now. Mm-hmm. Like, what do you think the interest is? And I say this as a Southerner too, like suddenly, like, what do you think the interest is suddenly in the Deep South or queer Appalachia?
That is a great question. I don't know if we have a great answer for it, but I think something that helped a lot is how the Instagram account was live for a full year before like we really made any major moves or even opened up the GoFundMe for the first zine. We've been on the internet for a while, making consistent posts. I think a lot of that interest, at least the interest in queer Appalachia specifically, has to do with a Venn diagram that we take up. I don't see a lot of other people like joining these things where it's like our Appalachian culture and our homespun roots, and then we also tie it to pop culture, and also some radical politics.
Some real radical politics.
It's a scale. We're always finding that we're too radical for a lot of people and not radical enough for some.
Yeah, that seems about right. So who's on your team? Like who actually is Queer Appalachia right now?
Oh yeah, it's a handful of people, and we kind of grow and shrink depending on what we're doing at the time. So we have, I'm sure you've met like Mamone, our creative director. We have a lot of people in our harm reduction wing that work with us. We work very closely with Virginia Harm Reduction Coalition, and we have a grant with them to do harm reduction work that we got together last year. And that's really cool because we were able to actually hire a couple folks for the first time. We're all volunteer run. And then of course there's the people who are involved in the zine, and we have like our editor, we have our copy editor, and then a team of people underneath as well. So it really fluctuates depending on what's happening at the time, and how you want to count like people who come on and do things with us. At what point is someone like in the collective? We try and keep it loose and informal, like everyone can come with us if they have a project or something they want to do. You know, we just got an intern about 2 weeks ago that I'm very excited about, who's been helping me get a lot of like mutual aid projects off the ground pretty quickly.
Nice. I've been thinking about this a little bit because I've been using zines in my coursework forever, and because I love the closeness that you get like to the creator in the zine, right? Like my students, the one zine that they love the most, I think, when we do trans history, is there's a zine called it's called The Transition Garden, and it's about like growing a garden to help you transition without big pharma. And so it's amazing. And my students are always like, holy shit, like who wrote this? And I'm like, someone your age wrote this. Like a 22-year-old wrote this zine, and it's available free online. But I'm wondering, I feel that kind of way about zines that I do about a project like yours that is, like you said, it's volunteer run. It's using a platform that a lot of people have access to, and it feels very, like, I feel like I know you all probably way more than I actually do. But I mean, does that make sense? Like, those two things seem really similar.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a digital version of the zine. I love social media because it can make things happen and grow communities and make projects happen where normally, I don't know, we wouldn't just be as connected.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask a real reportery sounding question, but you're the expert here, so I'm going to let you answer it. But what do people both in and out of the South have wrong about Appalachia?
Oh, about Appalachia, I think there's a lot of similarities to the South, but I'm not sure if people if people understand that I've lived in the South. I've lived all around Appalachia and the South, so it's a little tricky to answer that question because all I see is so much connectivity. I grew up in the Catskills. I was born in the Catskills in New York, and I lived in the DC area, in Virginia, in Texas, in North Carolina, and now West Virginia. So I think something that really resonates with me is in the introduction to Elizabeth Catt's book, What You're Getting Wrong About Appalachia, she talks about how she moved from like an area in the country where coal was an extractive economy to suddenly she moved somewhere else in Texas where it was like oil that was doing a lot of the same things culturally, where it's an industry that pays really well for working class people, but it also is very poisonous and toxic to the people who just live around, the refineries or plants. And one of the things that really struck me about that is it took me about 2 paragraphs to realize that she was in the same town that I was living in for 2 years. Just
Nice.
From the description of the oil refineries and the university, I nailed it. But the way that Elizabeth Catt saw those similarities there, that's kind of what I see. And Appalachia and the South have its own like rich cultural history that younger parts of the country like don't quite have that length of history or their involvement in American history going like all the way back to like colonialism and beyond. And I guess what I have to say is I'm not sure what people are getting wrong, but they're not getting wrong about every other place where there are queer people. There's a diversity of experiences.
It's funny to me because we talk about this a lot. IHP is in Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia now collecting. And so we talk about the similarities between the 3 states all the time. But for some reason, Alabama and Mississippi are like twin sibling states, like where one was born like 5 minutes before the other. And so we're always arm wrestling for last place, like for everything.
Yeah.
And I feel like that the way people talk about Appalachia is the way that Alabama and Mississippi talk about each other. As if it, like you said, like if it's this sort of, because there's so much poverty, because it's so rural, because it's so big, that it almost feels disposable to people. Or as we're fond of saying in IHP, the South is a cautionary tale for the rest of the country. Mm-hmm. Like, it might be bad here, but at least we don't live in Alabama, or at least we don't live in West Virginia. And so I get all of my feelings about that too, because and you and I both know that there is a ton of diversity of queer experience in these places, but either we've been written off wholly or we exist as a sort of like boogeyman, for other parts of the country because, thank God we live in the village, or thank God we live in, I don't know, Boys Town, or wherever it is gay people live in cities. I have no idea. Wherever real estate is cheap and is now expensive.
Fair. Absolutely. I encounter a lot of those microaggressions when I tell people that I'm in West Virginia, or I have moved to West Virginia. No one really knows what to make of it. If they're like, congratulations, or I'm sorry.
Well, I think a fully online project like this is a real template. I mean, are you all familiar with the Black Lesbian Archives Project?
We are, yeah.
So, the fact that they're running that project, they have this like physical component of materials, but that's a fully online project. I wonder what you think the benefit is for running a project like yours that has this like fully online component for other people who may want to start something similar, like, in their part of the country. Like, what is the benefit of that?
It's real DIY, the accessibility of something that's online. You can't beat it in a physical place. I'm seeing a lot of that in the last few weeks. Everyone on the internet is starting a mutual aid initiative online, and I love that, because all you need is an Instagram account, your phone, and you can start like making connections and creating content and start like generating things happening, whatever that thing may be.
Yeah, I think y'all have done such a great job in making the virtual world real. You use that as a platform for direct service. And there's a lot of pushes. There's a lot of grants coming out right now for people to do like digital direct service. And I think for traditional folks, like traditional nonprofits, that's really hard to kind of conceptualize. Do you have any kind of like tips for ways to make the internet feel more real and to use it, especially right now?
Yeah. I think what we do is we try and paint like a picture of what's happening in Appalachia when we ask for things, or try and create like initiatives. We try and explain the need really clearly, and if we can like connect that to a community that people have seen before, I think that's really helpful. Part of it is like the internet is so anonymous, and it's so anonymous, and it's so like broad reaching. So I think you have to find a way to humanize what's happening and like appeal to others.
Yeah.
I don't know, some like heart or some humor or a little bit of both, or I'm not sure how exactly is the best way to do that.
Well, and I think Megan's right. Like, the other part of what you guys do that I don't see a lot of other places is that you, like you said, your project started from this tragedy, but it evolved into something that acknowledges that, but it is not obsessed with that. And I see so much joy and humor in your platform that I don't see other places. And we talk about it, Megan and I talk about this all the time. Like, without queer joy, like, what is the point? And I'm angry.
Oh, yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but like, where's the joy?
Yeah, I agree completely. It's such an important part of the experience, because it can be hard, especially when you're living in rural places that have their own like specific challenges to queer life. It's really important to keep perspective and remember, like, oh yeah, this is like the queer joy and love. And I'm a big fan of pleasure activism by Adrienne Maree Brown. Like, without that love and pleasure and joy, what even are we like fighting for anyway?
Right. Who was it that said that an army of lovers could never be defeated? Right.
But it's true.
Yeah. I think we were talking just recently. There's an older donor that we've been working with who always refers to his partner as his lover. And every time he says it, it just makes me so happy, because I remember those older gay guys when I was much younger who would say, this is my lover, Steven, or this is my lover, Barbara, or whatever. And there's something so, I don't know, there's something so radical about the idea of just naming your pleasure. Like, this is the human body that is currently giving me the greatest amount of pleasure. Like, I really dig, right?
Mm-hmm.
I really dig that. Well,
so that y'all do that so unapologetically. Like, y'all are just so full frontal, unapologetically queer. Y'all will post like, bare-chested people riding and kissing on a tractor, one post, and then the next one is about the opioid crisis. Like, the way that you mix your politics and your real world kind of what's happening with this, like, you know, screw you, in your face queerness, I think is really connecting with people. And I think for a lot of nonprofits who've been shying away from that and doing more assimilation models to get the money, I think y'all are really sending an important message that the people are the focus, not the funders, right? That's our priorities, and it's working for y'all.
It's because we don't really have funders like that.
Well, it's a catch-22.
Yeah, we make this all happen from like sales of our art mostly. So the people that we appeal to are like, there's a lot of freedom in that. We do what we want. Yeah. And we're just ourselves, and that Venn diagram of like bare chests and trucks, and also like opioid crisis. That's just our Venn diagram of interests. That's just us.
Can you tell we're huge fans of you?
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly though, I think there's a lot of great things coming out of the project. So I'm also a huge fan.
That's very important. Well, yeah. Speaking of that, like, what are you all working on right now that you're excited about? Like, what's coming up that people should know about?
Oh man, well, we're always doing multiple things at once, but this COVID-19 pandemic really changed everything that we were planning on doing, and gave us a whole other world to play in for a while. And we've been mailing epidemic packages, like care packages, to folks. And actually, that's other people have been mailing these packages. We've done something really cool where a lot of us are quarantined at home at Queer Appalachia, so we don't quite have the same like mobility and ability to like leave our house and make things happen. So we also thought about how people who are disabled or autoimmune compromised, like rural queers like that, are going to have a really hard time preparing for this outbreak. And they might need things like disinfectants, and it's hard to get to the store, much less harder to get to the store when like your home health aide has quit, or there's a pandemic and every time you go outside, you're like exposing yourself to this virus. So we created this network, which is really just like a huge spreadsheet and lots of time in my email, where people have been signing up to mail care packages to other people in need. And I love that. It's, we thought about how people who present outside the gender binary are going to have a hard time at their regional hospitals or health clinics. And that's just something that we know from like personal experience and hearing about it from other people, what a nightmare it can be to go into like a urgent care when you're trans. So what I really love about this project is like now we've mobilized our larger community to engage in this work with us. It feels really good to me because it's less like people are like throwing like money at us and we're making this happen. It's more like people are using the money, their own money, and they're concretizing their own privilege, like they're able-bodied in their fully functioning immune system, and they're making like a real tangible difference in someone's life. I think it's very good for all the people involved to feel like they're doing something meaningful during this hard time. And it also is really great for me personally, because I'm not having to like constantly go to the grocery store and mail things, putting myself in danger. So we can like spread this risk around a little bit between our volunteers.
And is that something people can still sign up to do?
Yeah, we're closing it up shortly because we want to get people home safe, but it's in our link tree in our Instagram bio if you want to sign up to send a care package to an autoimmune compromised or disabled rural queer in need. You can get into my spreadsheet. Or if you need one, go ahead and sign up and we'll get you something.
This is awesome. I'm so glad that you took some time out of your quarantine to talk to us.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And that's not even it either. We're also doing something that's really exciting. We're teaming up with Wussy Magazine, based out of Atlanta,
Yeah.
and Southern Pride Queer Pride, which is both Atlanta and Durham. And we are doing what we're calling the Big Ass Telethon to End Metronormativity. And I don't know if we can do that in a telethon, but we're sure gonna have fun with it.
You have to say more about that.
Yeah, you gotta go.
Oh yeah. Well, it's we're trying to raise money for a lot of the queer nightlife entertainers who are out of work. Like, no one's having drag shows. We're starting to see some digital ones pop up, but we're trying to put together something that's like a fundraiser and drag show, and it's way more than drag. We're having comedians and musicians play. It's like with Queer Appalachia, we're trying to do this like full spectrum of entertainment. And we have some really exciting names signed up to help us so far. Like, I can tell you that Orville Peck has signed up to give us some work for it. He's making something like some original content for us. And our friend Whitney Cummings is also doing something for it, which I think is really like lovely and delightful. And like a handful of drag queens, entertainers, and performers from like Appalachia and the South who are still like trickling in the submissions. People still have time to submit a video segment to that. And you can find that either on, you can look in our Instagram, our link in bio, or Wussy Magazine's website. It'll be in there somewhere.
Great. We'll make sure and put that in description box and all the stuff that we share as well too, so folks can find it and go check it out.
Oh yeah, and yeah, the live airing of that will be April 25th.
April 25th. Okay.
Cool.
Well, yeah. Thank you so much for talking to us. Is there anything else that you would like us to know? Any, words that you would like to impart on us before we head out?
It's really easy to despair during these times. Like, we just had a really hard 48 hours with John Pine, and then Bernie Sanders suspended his campaign, and then the news that like cats could get COVID. Those three things shook me. But one of the things that keeps me like sane or hopeful is honestly that mutual aid campaign with the autoimmune compromised and disabled queers. Like the intensity and like effectiveness that the larger community signed up to help, and the way that it's been running like pretty smoothly for the most part, that gives me a lot of hope at how quickly people were to mobilize and how eager they are to help. That does make me feel good. So I just want to share that with you all, that it's good to remind everyone there are good things happening in the world. The cats are going to be okay.
Right. And we'll be okay too.
We'll be okay. It'll just take a little longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Southern queers have always been here for each other, and we're going to continue to do that. And we're able to see it through video now.
That's right. It's easier to archive it this way.
Exactly. Record everything.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us, and we will put all the links down below. Make sure that you check out Queer Appalachia on their Instagram. They've got Facebook. Do y'all have a Twitter?
Twitter's not really where we shine.
Yeah, we don't really shine there either. So Instagram, Facebook, check it out, April 25th. We'll make sure we link to that too and share it on our social media. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Oh, that's like full froze right there.